Jeremy Adams, human diplomat and former Space Force pilot, stands accused of impregnating Princess Iris, the notoriously unattractive daughter of King Zixnor. The Galactic Council chamber erupts in chaos as the 32-year-old envoy faces the assembly. Holographic evidence flickers to life, displaying Jeremy entering the princess's private chambers on multiple occasions. The images cast an eerie blue glow across the faces of the gathered alien representatives, their expressions a mix of shock, disgust, and morbid curiosity. King Zixnor, a towering figure with 4 muscular arms and iridescent scales that shimmer under the chamber's harsh lights, rises from his ornate seat. His voice booms across the room, demanding Jeremy's immediate execution for this perceived slight against the royal bloodline of the Binar Empire. Dr. Elena Cortez, the human ambassador, steps forward. Her face etched with concern, she raises her hands in a placating gesture. "Esteemed members of the council," she begins, her voice steady despite the tension, "we must not rush to judgment. A thorough investigation is necessary before any action is taken." She pauses, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "Let us not forget Earth's recent technological contributions to our galactic community. Surely we owe our human allies the courtesy of due process." Murmurs ripple through the assembly. Some nod in agreement, while others hiss their disapproval. Jeremy, his posture straight and eyes focused, requests the right to speak in his own defense. The council chairman, a being of pure energy contained within a hovering metallic sphere, reluctantly grants permission. Jeremy clears his throat, his voice echoing in the sudden hush that falls over the chamber. "Honored council members, I stand before you to explain the nature of my relationship with Princess Iris. We have been meeting in secret, not for nefarious purposes, but to discuss human cultural practices, specifically art and music." A collective gasp rises from the alien delegates. Jeremy presses on, revealing that these subjects are strictly forbidden in Binar society. He explains that he was unaware of Iris's royal status, as she had carefully disguised herself during their encounters. As Jeremy speaks, confusion and disbelief ripple through the assembly. Representatives of various alien races turn to one another, whispering fervently. The atmosphere in the chamber grows thick with tension and uncertainty. Suddenly, the doors to the council chamber slide open with a pneumatic hiss. A sleek, chrome-plated medical droid glides in, its sensors blinking rapidly. In its metallic hands, it carries a datapad containing the results of Princess Iris's genetic scan. The droid's synthesized voice cuts through the murmurs. Analysis complete. Fetal DNA shows markers of both human and Binar origin. Paternity confirmed. Jeremy Adams. The announcement sends shockwaves through the assembly. Interspecies breeding between humans and Binars was previously thought impossible. The implications of this discovery are staggering, potentially reshaping the understanding of galactic biology and genetics. King Zixnor's scales flash a dangerous crimson. His 4 fists clench in rage as he processes this unprecedented situation. With a roar that silences the chamber, he calls for an emergency session of the Galactic Security Council to determine the fate of both Jeremy and the unborn child. As guards move to escort Jeremy from the chamber, his mind races. The weight of his actions and their potential consequences for human-alien relations throughout the galaxy press down upon him. Little does he know, this is only the beginning of a much larger conspiracy. In a secure holding cell aboard the Council's space station, Jeremy sits alone, his future uncertain. The soft chime of an incoming message breaks the silence. An encrypted communication flashes across the cell's view screen, its source unknown. The message hints at a deeper plot surrounding his relationship with Princess Iris, one that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. As Jeremy reads the cryptic message, he realizes that his personal affair has become the catalyst for events that will echo across the stars. The fate of not just his unborn child, but potentially all of humanity, now hangs in the balance. Jeremy's eyes darted across the encrypted message, his mind racing to decipher its meaning. The cell's view screen flickered, casting an eerie glow on his face as he contemplated the implications of a deeper plot. Suddenly, the cell door hissed open, startling him from his thoughts. A figure stepped into the room, shrouded in a shimmer of light that seemed to distort its form. As the door closed behind her, the shimmer dissipated, revealing a sight that made Jeremy's breath catch in his throat. Where he expected to see the notoriously unattractive Princess Iris, stood a being of ethereal beauty. Her skin sparkled with an iridescent sheen, reminiscent of the finest opals. Multi-hued eyes, swirling with colors Jeremy had never seen before, locked onto his. The princess's true form was a far cry from the rumors that had circulated throughout the galaxy. "Jeremy," Iris spoke, her voice melodious and clear. "I'm sorry for the deception, but I had no choice." Jeremy found himself at a loss for words, his mind struggling to reconcile the stunning alien before him with the accusations that had been hurled at him mere hours ago. Iris stepped closer, her movements graceful and deliberate. "I know you must have questions, but we don't have much time." She glanced nervously at the cell door. "I love you, Jeremy, and what I'm about to tell you may be difficult to believe, but it's the truth." She took a deep breath, her iridescent skin shimmering with the movement. "I sought you out intentionally. Our child. It's the key to saving my people." Jeremy's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? How could our child possibly—" "A genetic defect has been plaguing the Binar for generations," Iris interrupted, her voice urgent. "We've been searching for a cure, and our scientists believe that a human-Binar hybrid could hold the answer." The weight of her words hit Jeremy like a plasma blast. He opened his mouth to respond, but the sudden blare of alarms cut him off. The cell's red emergency lights began to flash, bathing the room in an ominous glow. "We need to go now," Iris said, her eyes wide with fear. She pulled a small device from her robes and pressed it against the cell's control panel. Sparks flew as the door's locking mechanism short-circuited. As the door slid open, they were met by Dr. Elena Cortez, her face etched with concern and urgency. "Jeremy, Princess Iris, thank goodness I found you," she said, slightly out of breath. "The paternity test was falsified. The medical droid was tampered with." Jeremy's head spun with the rapid influx of information. "What? But why would—" "There's no time to explain everything," Dr. Cortez cut in. "There's a faction within the Galactic Council manipulating this situation. We need to expose them before it's too late." The trio rushed into the corridor, the station's emergency sirens growing louder. The sound of heavy footsteps and energy weapons charging echoed from around the corner. "This way," Iris whispered, guiding them down an adjacent hallway. Her knowledge of the station's layout proved invaluable as they navigated the maze-like structure. As they rounded another corner, they came face to face with a squad of Binar warriors, their scaled armor gleaming under the flashing emergency lights. At their head stood Commander Krelzar, his 4 arms each wielding a different energy weapon. "Surrender the human," Krelzar demanded, his voice a low growl. Jeremy stepped forward, positioning himself between the Binar warriors and his companions. His Space Force training kicked in as he assessed their odds. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Iris placed a hand on Jeremy's shoulder, stepping up beside him. "Stand down, Commander," she ordered, her royal authority evident in her tone. "This situation is more complex than you realize." Confusion flickered across Krelzar's face as he took in the princess's true appearance. His hesitation gave Dr. Cortez the opening she needed. "Commander, we have evidence of a conspiracy within the Galactic Council," she said, her voice firm. "Your king is being manipulated. We need to reach the communication hub to broadcast the truth." Krelzar's grip on his weapons tightened, his inner conflict visible in the twitching of his scales. After a tense moment, he lowered his arms. "Explain, quickly." As Dr. Cortez outlined her discoveries, Jeremy's mind raced. The encrypted message, Iris's revelation, the falsified paternity test, it all pointed to a plot far more intricate than he could have imagined. His gaze met Iris's, and in her multi-hued eyes, he saw a reflection of his own purpose. With Krelzar's reluctant assistance, they made their way toward the communication hub. The station's corridors were a chaos of flashing lights and panicked delegates. Jeremy's military instincts kept him alert, scanning for potential threats as they moved. As they approached the hub, The sound of raised voices reached their ears. Jeremy signaled for the group to halt, pressing himself against the wall beside the entrance. He peered around the corner, his heart racing at the sight that greeted him. Inside the hub, Counselor Vexthor stood surrounded by a group of armed aliens, their weapons trained on the hub's control panels. The counselor's face was contorted with rage as he barked orders to his accomplices. Jeremy turned back to the group, his voice low. "It's Vexthor. He's got control of the hub." Iris's eyes narrowed. Vexthor has always opposed Earth's involvement in galactic politics. This must be his attempt to sever ties between humans and the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Cortez nodded grimly. "If we don't stop him, he'll broadcast his own version of events. The consequences could be catastrophic." As they huddled together, formulating a plan to outmaneuver Vexthor and his conspirators, Jeremy felt a vibration from his pocket. He pulled out his personal device, eyes widening as he saw the encrypted message from earlier beginning to decrypt itself. "Wait," he whispered, holding up the device. "This might change everything." The others gathered around, their faces illuminated by the screen's soft glow. As the message revealed its secrets, a new understanding dawned on them all. The information held the potential to not only expose Vexthor's plot, but also to unite the fractured factions against a threat that loomed larger than any of them had imagined. With renewed purpose, Jeremy met the eyes of his unlikely allies. The fate of human-alien relations, the future of the Binar species, and the balance of power in the galaxy now rested in their hands. As they prepared to confront Vexthor and his conspirators, Jeremy realized that this moment would define not just his own fate, but the course of galactic history. History. With a deep breath, Jeremy stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he moved to confront Vexthor, Jeremy's device vibrated once more. The encrypted message had finally decrypted itself fully, revealing information that sent a chill down his spine. He raised his hand, halting the group's advance. "Wait," Jeremy said, his voice tight. "Everyone needs to see this." The others gathered around, their faces illuminated by the screen's soft glow. As they read, the atmosphere in the corridor shifted palpably. Even Vexthor, peering over Krelzar's shoulder, fell silent. The message, originating from a covert Earth intelligence agency, exposed a plot far more sinister than any of them had imagined. A technologically advanced alien race known as the Zargoth had been manipulating galactic politics from the shadows. The Binar genetic defect, the conspiracy within the Galactic Council, all were part of their elaborate scheme to weaken potential opposition to their impending invasion. Jeremy looked up, meeting the stunned gazes of those around him. "This changes everything," he said softly. Vexthor, his earlier anger replaced by shock, stepped back. "Impossible," he muttered, scales shifting color rapidly. Iris placed a hand on Jeremy's arm, her multi-hued eyes wide with concern. "The legends," she whispered. "They spoke of a great darkness that would threaten all life in the galaxy. We always thought it was metaphorical, but—" Dr. Cortez, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. "We need more information, and we need to warn the Council." Jeremy nodded, his mind racing. "Vexthor," he said, turning to the counselor, "I know we've been at odds, but this threat is bigger than any of us. We need to work together." The counselor hesitated, conflict evident on his face. Finally, he nodded. "Agreed. But how do we proceed?" "First, we secure the communication hub," Jeremy said, slipping into his role as a Space Force officer. "Then we gather all the data we can on these Zargoth. Dr. Cortez, I need you to examine Iris and our child. If the Binar defect is engineered, there might be clues in their biology." As the group moved towards the hub, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. The overhead lights flickered, plunging the corridor into momentary darkness before emergency power kicked in. "What's happening?" Krelzar demanded, his weapons at the ready. A nearby view screen crackled to life, showing the space outside the station. Massive ships, unlike any they had seen before, shimmered into view as they decloaked. Their hulls were a deep, light-absorbing black, covered in strange, pulsing veins of energy. "The Zargoth," Iris breathed. "They're here." The station shuddered as the first barrage of weapons fire impacted their shields. Jeremy grabbed Iris's hand, steadying her as the floor beneath them trembled. "Change of plans," he shouted over the din of alarms and distant explosions. "Krelzar, rally every security force on this station. Vexathor, get the delegates to safe zones. Dr. Cortez, Iris, we need to get to the medical bay. If there's a cure for the Binar in our child, we need to find it now." As they split up, Jeremy and Iris shared a look of understanding. Their hands intertwined, a gesture of solidarity in the face of an uncertain future. "I'm sorry," Iris said as they ran towards the medical bay. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Jeremy squeezed her hand. "We're in this together now. Whatever comes next, we face it as one." They reached the medical bay just as another impact rocked the station. Dr. Cortez immediately set to work, her fingers flying over the advanced medical scanners. As Iris lay on the examination table, Jeremy stood watch at the door, his every sense alert for danger. The sound of distant weapons fire and shouted orders echoed through the station's corridors. "Jeremy!" Dr. Cortez called, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and excitement. "You need to see this." He moved to the doctor's side, looking at the holographic display hovering above Iris. The image showed a detailed view of the developing embryo, surrounded by a swirl of complex data. "The hybrid DNA," Dr. Cortez explained, "it's producing antibodies that are neutralizing the engineered defect in Iris's genetic code. It's not just a cure for her. This could save the entire Binar species." A surge of emotions washed over Jeremy, pride, hope, and a fierce protectiveness. He looked at Iris, seeing the same feelings reflected in her iridescent eyes. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. The medical bay doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a sight that made Jeremy's blood run cold. Standing in the doorway was a being unlike any he had ever seen. Its body seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, with eyes that glowed with an otherworldly intelligence. A Zargoth had breached the station. As Jeremy positioned himself between the alien and Iris, he knew that the real battle was only just beginning. The fate of not just the Binar, but perhaps the entire galaxy, now rested on their shoulders. Shoulders. The Zargoth's liquid metal form rippled as it advanced, its glowing eyes fixed on Iris. Jeremy's mind raced, assessing the situation. He glanced around the medical bay, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. His eyes landed on a surgical laser on a nearby tray. "Dr. Cortez, get Iris out of here," Jeremy ordered, lunging for the laser. The Zargoth moved with uncanny speed, its arm elongating and whipping towards Jeremy. He ducked, feeling the air displacement as the alien's limb passed over his head. Jeremy rolled, coming up with the laser in hand. He fired, the beam striking the Zargoth's chest. The alien's form rippled, but the damage seemed minimal. It let out a high-pitched screech that made Jeremy's ears ring. Alarms blared throughout the station as more explosions rocked the structure. Jeremy knew they were running out of time. "We need to move now," he shouted, backing towards the door where Dr. Cortez was supporting Iris. As they retreated into the corridor, Jeremy's comm unit crackled to life. Commander Krelzar's voice came through, strained and urgent. "Human, we're being overrun. The Zargoth are flooding the lower levels. We need a plan." Jeremy's Space Force training kicked in. He quickly assessed their options, formulating a strategy on the fly. "Krelzar, fall back to Section C7. We'll use the station's layout to our advantage. Set up choke points at the major intersections." "Understood," Krelzar replied, "but we're outnumbered. We need more firepower." Jeremy turned to Iris, who was regaining her strength. "Iris, you mentioned Binar energy weapons. Where can we find them?" Iris's eyes lit up with willpower. "Armory Delta, 2 levels down. I can operate them." Jeremy nodded, impressed by her determination. "All right, let's move." As they made their way through the chaos-filled corridors, Jeremy coordinated with Krelzar, directing the defensive efforts. Human security personnel merged with alien delegates, forming an unlikely but determined fighting force. They reached Armory Delta, and Iris wasted no time. Her hands flew over the Binar weapons with practiced ease, activating and distributing them to the defenders. "I didn't know you could do that," Jeremy said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Iris smiled grimly. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Jeremy, but I'm glad you're here to find out." Armed with the powerful Binar weapons, they pushed back against the Zargoth advance. Jeremy and Iris fought side by side, their movements synchronizing with each passing moment. Human adaptability blended with Binar precision, creating a formidable fighting duo. As they held a crucial choke point, Dr. Cortez's voice came over the comm. "Jeremy, I've made a breakthrough with the cure, but I need access to the main biological synthesizer in Sector E." Jeremy grimaced. Sector E was currently overrun with Zargoth forces. "We'll find a way, Doctor. Stand by." Just then, Counselor Vexthor appeared, his scales shifting colors rapidly. "Human, I have disturbing news. Several council members were unwitting pawns of the Zargoth. Their infiltration runs deeper than we imagined." Before Jeremy could respond, a massive explosion shook the station. Through a nearby viewport, he saw a Binar battle fleet engaging the Zargoth warships. "It's my father," Iris gasped. "He's here." King Zixnor's voice boomed over the station-wide comm system. "Attention all forces. This is King Zixnor of the Binar. We stand with you against this invasion. Together, we will repel these invaders." Jeremy felt a surge of hope. With the Binar fleet evening the odds in space, they had a chance. But they still needed to reach the biological synthesizer. An idea struck him. "The cargo transport system," he muttered. "We can use it to outflank the Zargoth." He quickly outlined his plan to the others. It was risky, but it was their best shot at reaching Sector E. "We'll need someone to override the system from the main engineering hub," Jeremy explained. A new voice joined the conversation. "I can do it." Jeremy turned to see a human woman, her face streaked with grease and perseverance. "Chief Engineer Zara Vex," she introduced herself. "I know this station's systems better than anyone. I can make it happen." Jeremy hesitated, knowing the danger of the mission. But time was running out and billions of lives hung in the balance. "All right, Chief, but be careful. We'll create a diversion to draw their forces away from engineering." As Zara set off on her perilous mission, Jeremy rallied the defenders for one last push. The station had become a battlefield, with every corridor and chamber contested. "This is it," Jeremy said to Iris as they prepared to lead the charge. "Ready?" Iris nodded, her multi-hued eyes shining with a mix of fear and grit. "Together," she replied. With that, they plunged into the fray, their weapons blazing. The battle for the station raged on, with the fate of multiple species hanging in the balance. As Jeremy and Iris fought their way towards Sector E, they knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The battle for the station intensified, with Jeremy and Iris leading the charge towards Sector E. Suddenly, the station's emergency systems blared to life, initiating a lockdown protocol. "Damn it," Jeremy muttered, eyeing the rapidly closing bulkheads. "They're trying to contain the Zargoth sabotage." Iris looked at him, her eyes wide with concern. "What now?" Jeremy's mind raced, drawing on his Space Force training. "We need to move fast. I know these starship designs. We can predict the lockdown sequence and find alternative routes." They sprinted down the corridor, Jeremy calling out directions as sealed doors blocked their path. "Left here! Watch out for the—" A hiss of escaping air cut him off as a section of the corridor began to depressurize. Jeremy grabbed Iris's hand, pulling her through the narrowing gap of a closing emergency door. They tumbled through, the door sealing shut behind them with a resounding clang. As they caught their breath, Jeremy's comm crackled. "Human," it was Krelzar. "We've got civilians trapped in Section D9, can't reach them." "On it," Jeremy replied, already calculating a new route. "Iris, we need to make a detour." They navigated through the maze of closing bulkheads and depressurizing sections, Jeremy's quick thinking keeping them one step ahead of the station's protective measures. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of alien delegates, huddled in fear. Among them stood a regal Binar female, her multi-hued eyes narrowing as she saw Jeremy. "You," she hissed, "the human who accused our people." Iris stepped forward. "Aunt Zixalara, please. Jeremy's here to help." Jeremy nodded respectfully to the ambassador. "We need to move. This section isn't safe." As if to emphasize his point, the station shuddered under another barrage from the Zargoth ships. Zixalara hesitated, then nodded curtly. Jeremy took charge, guiding the group through the treacherous environment. He directed them through maintenance shafts and emergency routes, always staying ahead of the lockdown sequence. Zixalara watched him closely, her initial distrust giving way to grudging respect as she witnessed his leadership and dedication to protecting everyone, regardless of species. As they neared Sector E, Jeremy's comm buzzed again. It was Dr. Cortez. "Jeremy, we've reached the biological synthesizer, but it's been damaged. We need a new plan." Before Jeremy could respond, a chilling screech echoed through the corridor. A squad of Zargoth warriors emerged from the shadows, led by a towering figure with cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the emergency lighting. "Vorthax," one of the delegates whispered in terror. Jeremy pushed Iris behind him, raising his weapon. "Get the civilians to safety," he ordered Krelzar. "We'll hold them off." The battle that ensued pushed Jeremy and Iris to their limits. Vorthax's enhanced speed and strength made him a formidable opponent. Jeremy ducked and weaved. His shots barely phased the Zargoth leader. Suddenly, Iris cried out. Jeremy turned to see her body glowing with an otherworldly energy. She raised her hands and bolts of pure energy shot from her fingertips, striking the Zargoth warriors with devastating effect. "The baby," Iris gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can feel its power." Together they fought in perfect harmony. Jeremy's tactical mind complemented Iris's newfound abilities, slowly turning the tide against Vorthax's squad. As the last Zargoth fell, Dr. Cortez's voice came through again. "Jeremy, Iris, I have a proposal. It's risky, but it might be our only chance to save the Binar." The doctor quickly outlined her plan to use Iris as a living incubator for the cure. Jeremy's heart clenched at the potential danger to Iris and their unborn child. Iris met his gaze, her decision already made. "I have to do this, Jeremy. For my people." They reached the biological synthesizer room, securing it as Dr. Cortez prepared for the procedure. Jeremy stood torn, knowing his skills were needed elsewhere, but reluctant to leave Iris's side. Iris squeezed his hand. "Go. Lead the counterattack. I'll be here when you get back." With a heavy heart, Jeremy turned to leave. Just then, King Zixnor's voice boomed through the station. The Binar fleet had pushed back the Zargoth ships, but a massive dreadnought was approaching, carrying enough firepower to obliterate them all. Jeremy's mind raced, formulating a desperate plan. He turned to the station's chief engineer. "The experimental FTL drive. Could we use it to create a localized wormhole?" The engineer's eyes widened. "It's unstable, but yes, it might work. It could tear the dreadnought apart or send it across the galaxy." "Do it," Jeremy ordered. He cast one last look at Iris, who nodded encouragingly despite her obvious pain as Dr. Cortez began the procedure. As Jeremy rushed to implement his daring plan, the fate of multiple species hung in the balance. The station shuddered under the approaching dreadnought's first salvo. Time was running out. Time was running short as Jeremy sprinted towards the engineering bay, his mind racing with the possibilities and dangers of his audacious plan. The station groaned and shuddered under the assault from the approaching Zargoth dreadnought. Emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows as Jeremy navigated the chaos-filled corridors. He burst into the engineering bay, startling the frantic crew. "Chief Engineer Zara," he called out, spotting her hunched over a console. "We need to modify the FTL drive, now." Zara's eyes widened as Jeremy quickly outlined his plan. "A localized wormhole? That's insane. The drive was never designed for that kind of precision." "It's our only shot," Jeremy insisted, moving to a nearby terminal. His fingers flew over the controls, initiating the drive's startup sequence. "We need to rewrite the containment protocols on the fly." As they worked, alarms blared throughout the station. The dreadnought's weapons were powering up, preparing to deliver a devastating blow. Jeremy's comm crackled to life with Dr. Cortez's urgent voice. "Jeremy, we've started the procedure on Iris, but something's happening. Her body, it's emitting some kind of energy signature." Before Jeremy could respond, the engineering bay doors slid open. Ambassador Zixalara rushed in, her usually composed demeanor replaced by wide-eyed urgency. "Human, there's something you need to know." she gasped, catching her breath. An ancient Binar legend speaks of a hybrid being capable of interfacing with advanced technology. I believe Iris and her unborn child might be the key. Jeremy's mind raced, processing this new information. The station rocked violently, nearly throwing them off their feet. He made a split-second decision. "We need to bring Iris here," he said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "It's risky, but it might be our only chance to stabilize the wormhole." He tapped his comm, relaying instructions to Dr. Cortez and Commander Krelzar. As he spoke, the engineering team worked feverishly to modify the FTL drive. Warning lights flashed across every console as the untested modifications pushed the system to its limits. Minutes felt like hours as Jeremy divided his attention between the drive's readings and his comm, listening anxiously for updates on Iris's progress through the station. The Zargoth dreadnought loomed ever closer, its massive silhouette visible through the bay's viewport. Suddenly, the ship rocked with a massive impact. Sparks flew from overloaded systems, and a section of the ceiling collapsed nearby. Jeremy ducked, shielding his head from debris. "Structural integrity failing in sections 12 through 18? An ensign shouted over the din. "Emergency force fields activating." Jeremy gritted his teeth, willing the station to hold together just a little longer. He turned to see Chief Engineer Zara emerge from a tangle of cables, her face streaked with sweat and grime. "It's done," she announced, her voice a mix of pride and trepidation. "The drive's been modified, but Jeremy, I can't guarantee it'll be stable." Before Jeremy could respond, the bay doors slid open once more. Dr. Cortez and her team rushed in, supporting a pale and trembling Iris between them. Jeremy's heart clenched at the sight of her body glowing with an otherworldly energy. "Iris," he breathed, moving to her side. She looked up at him, her multi-hued eyes filled with a mixture of pain and persistence. "I'm here, Jeremy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you need me to do?" Jeremy guided her to the modified FTL drive, explaining the situation as quickly as he could. Iris nodded, understanding the gravity of their predicament. "I'll try," she said, reaching out to touch the drive's control panel. The moment her fingers made contact, the energy surrounding her intensified. The drive hummed to life, its pitch rising rapidly as power surged through it. Iris gasped, her back arching as she connected with the alien technology. Jeremy stood by her side, one hand on the small of her back, the other hovering over the emergency shutdown. The wormhole began to form, a swirling vortex of energy that sent cascading waves of light across the engineering bay. But something was wrong. The wormhole pulsed erratically, its edges fraying as it struggled to maintain coherence. Iris cried out in pain, her body shaking with the effort of controlling the massive energies. "It's unstable," Zara shouted over the deafening roar of the drive. "We can't contain it." Jeremy looked from the wildly fluctuating readings to Iris's agonized face. He had to make a choice: shut down the drive and face certain destruction from the Zargoth dreadnought, or push forward and risk tearing the station apart. In that moment of indecision, Iris's eyes snapped open, glowing with an intense inner light. She spoke, her voice overlaid with a strange, echoing quality. "I can do this, Jeremy," she said, her gaze locked with his. "Trust me." Jeremy nodded, his hand moving away from the shutdown control. He watched in awe as Iris's body began to pulse in rhythm with the wormhole, the two energies synchronizing. The chaotic readings on the nearby consoles began to stabilize. Suddenly, the station rocked with the most violent impact yet. The viewport cracked, a spiderweb of fissures spreading across its surface. Through the damaged window, Jeremy saw the Zargoth dreadnought's main weapon powering up, a blinding point of light at its center. "Brace for impact," he shouted, pulling Iris close to him as the dreadnought fired its devastating weapon. Time seemed to slow as the beam of destructive energy hurtled towards the station. Jeremy's finger hovered over the wormhole activation switch, every muscle in his body tense. He looked at Iris, saw the persistence in her eyes, and made his decision. He pressed the button. The wormhole exploded into full existence just as the Zargoth weapon was about to strike. Space itself seemed to bend and warp around them, creating a dazzling display of cosmic forces. The energy beam from the dreadnought caught the edge of the wormhole's event horizon, its trajectory bending impossibly. Jeremy watched in disbelief as the beam curved back on itself, arcing through space to strike the Zargoth dreadnought. The massive ship shuddered under the impact of its own weapon, great rents tearing open in its hull. But the danger was not nearly finished. The wormhole's pull intensified, threatening to drag in everything nearby, including the station. Debris and smaller Zargoth ships began to be sucked into the swirling vortex. Iris's body went rigid, her eyes blazing with otherworldly power. Jeremy held her tightly, feeling the incredible energies coursing through her. "Hold on, Iris," he urged, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wormhole. "You can do this. Focus on containing it to the Zargoth ships." Sweat beaded on Iris's forehead as she concentrated, her face a mask of intense focus. Slowly, gradually, the pull of the wormhole began to shift. Jeremy watched in amazement as the Zargoth dreadnought, crippled by its own weapon, began to slide inexorably towards the vortex. The massive ship, along with its support vessels, was drawn into the swirling maw of the wormhole. As the last of the Zargoth forces disappeared into the spatial anomaly, Iris let out a final, exhausted gasp. The wormhole collapsed in on itself with a thunderous implosion, leaving behind a stunned silence and a vista of empty space where the enemy fleet had been moments before. Iris went limp in Jeremy's arms, her eyes rolling back as she lost consciousness. The glow faded from her skin, leaving her pale and still. "Iris!" Jeremy cried, lowering her gently to the floor. "Dr. Cortez, quickly!" As the medical team rushed to Iris's side, Jeremy looked out at the star-filled expanse beyond the cracked viewport. The immediate threat had passed, but he knew their challenges were just getting started. The station was severely damaged, Iris's condition was unknown, and the consequences of their actions were yet to be fully understood. With a deep breath, Jeremy turned back to face the chaos of the engineering bay, ready to confront whatever came next. The immediate danger had passed, but a new set of challenges loomed on the horizon. Jeremy cradled Iris's unconscious form as Dr. Cortez and her team swarmed around them, medical scanners whirring. The faint glow emanating from Iris's skin slowly faded, leaving her pale and still. "We need to get her to the medical bay now," Dr. Cortez ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Her vitals are erratic, and I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from both her and the fetus." As they rushed through the damaged corridors, Jeremy's mind raced. He'd seen Iris tap into unimaginable power, bending space itself to their will. But at what cost? The medical bay was a flurry of activity when they arrived. Dr. Cortez immediately began barking orders, her team moving with practiced efficiency. Jeremy found himself gently but firmly pushed to the side as they worked to stabilize Iris. Hours passed in a haze of worried pacing and anxious glances at the various monitors surrounding Iris's bed. Jeremy barely registered the commotion outside as rescue operations began, and reports of the Zargoth fleet's defeat trickled in. A commotion at the medical bay's entrance snapped Jeremy out of his worried trance. King Zixnor strode in, his regal bearing at odds with the fear evident in his eyes as he caught sight of his daughter. "What happened?" the king demanded, his gaze fixed on Iris's still form. Jeremy opened his mouth to explain, but found himself at a loss for words. How could he possibly convey the magnitude of what Iris had accomplished? Before he could formulate a response, Dr. Cortez approached, her expression a mix of concern and excitement. "Your Majesty, Jeremy, I've made a rather startling discovery." She gestured to a holographic display showcasing a complex array of genetic data. The energy surge from the wormhole incident, combined with the accelerated growth of the fetus, has resulted in some truly remarkable changes. The child's genetic structure has been altered in ways I've never seen before. King Zixnor's eyes widened. "What does this mean for my daughter and grandchild?" "It's too early to say for certain," Dr. Cortez admitted, "but preliminary data suggests the child may possess abilities far beyond what we've seen in either human or Benar physiology. This could have far-reaching implications for both our species." As if on cue, Iris stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Jeremy was at her side in an instant, grasping her hand. Jeremy! Iris's voice was weak, but her multi-hued eyes were clear and focused. What happened? The Zargoth, did we stop them? We did, Jeremy assured her, his voice thick with emotion. You were incredible, Iris. You saved us all. King Zixnor stepped forward, his earlier hostility towards Jeremy seemingly forgotten in the face of his daughter's condition. Iris, my child, how do you feel? Iris's brow furrowed as she took stock of her body. I feel different, like there's a current running just beneath my skin, and the baby, her free hand moved to her swollen abdomen. I can sense it more clearly now. It's as if we're connected on a level I can't quite explain. Dr. Cortez nodded, making notes on her datapad. That aligns with our readings. Iris, I'd like to run some more tests to better understand the changes you and the child have undergone. As the doctor began her examination, a low rumble reverberated through the station. Jeremy glanced out the nearest viewport to see a massive Binar vessel docking alongside the damaged structure. King Zixnor noticed Jeremy's questioning look. I've brought a contingent of our best engineers and medical personnel to assist with repairs and treatment of the injured. The Galactic Council may have been infiltrated, but the Binar Empire stands ready to aid its allies. The king's words carried a weight of grudging respect as he regarded Jeremy. After a moment of internal debate, he spoke again. I may have been hasty in my earlier judgment of you, human. Your actions here and your obvious devotion to my daughter have given me cause to reconsider. Jeremy blinked in surprise at the unexpected olive branch. Before he could respond, a familiar voice crackled over the station's comm system. Attention all personnel and guests, Counselor Vexthor announced. An emergency session of the Galactic Council has been called to address recent events. All available representatives are requested to convene in the main chamber in 1 standard hour. King Zixnor straightened, his regal bearing returning. I must attend this meeting. Jeremy, I trust you will remain with Iris? Jeremy nodded firmly. I'm not going anywhere. As the king departed, Jeremy turned back to Iris, who was watching him with a mix of love and apprehension. Jeremy, she said softly, there's something else. While I was unconscious, I saw things, glimpses of possible futures, some beautiful, some terrifying. I think our child might have some connection to time itself. Jeremy's mind reeled at the implications. Before he could fully process this new information, Dr. Cortez approached with a grave expression. I hate to interrupt, she said, but we have a situation. The Zargoth scientist, Kix-Allah, is demanding to speak with you both. He claims to have critical information about a hidden Zargoth base that poses an immediate threat to our newfound peace. Jeremy and Iris exchanged a worried glance. It seemed their trials were far from finished. Send him in, Jeremy said, squeezing Iris's hand. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together. As they made their way to the conference room, Jeremy couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into yet another storm. The tension in the air was palpable as they entered. King Zixnor, Counselor Vexthor, and the Earth representatives were already seated around a large holographic display, their faces etched with concern. The image hovering above the table showed a detailed map of a sector Jeremy didn't recognize, with a pulsing red dot marking what he assumed was the hidden Zargoth base. As soon as they stepped inside, the heated debate that had been underway came to an abrupt halt. All eyes turned to Iris, her pregnancy now visibly advanced beyond what should have been possible in such a short time. Iris, Jeremy, Counselor Vexthor greeted them, his tone grave. We were just discussing our options regarding this new threat. King Zixnor's gaze lingered on his daughter, a mix of worry and pride evident in his expression. The question before us is whether to attempt a diplomatic approach or launch a preemptive strike. Before either Jeremy or Iris could respond, Iris suddenly doubled over, crying out in pain. Her body began to glow with an intense, otherworldly light that filled the room. Iris! Jeremy exclaimed, quickly moving to support her. The political discussion forgotten, he gently lowered her to the ground as she clutched her swollen abdomen. It's time, Iris gasped, her eyes wide with a combination of fear and wonder. King Zixnor leapt to his feet, his regal composure cracking. Someone fetch Dr. Cortez immediately. As if summoned by the thought alone, Dr. Cortez burst into the room, medical team in tow. They quickly surrounded Iris, their equipment whirring to life as they assessed her condition. The accelerated pregnancy has reached its climax, Dr. Cortez announced, her voice steady despite the chaos. She's going into labor right now. Jeremy knelt beside Iris, holding her hand tightly as she began to breathe heavily. The council members and Earth representatives watched in stunned silence, the Zargoth threat momentarily forgotten in the face of this miraculous event. Suddenly, the lights in the conference room began to flicker wildly. The holographic display above the table sparked and sputtered before exploding into a dazzling array of images and data streams. Iris's eyes glazed over, glowing with the same intensity as her skin. "Jeremy," she whispered, her voice strained with effort. "I can see so much. The baby, it's showing me things." "What do you mean?" Jeremy asked, his heart racing. Iris's free hand reached out, as if trying to grasp the swirling data in the air. "The Zargoth base, their plans. I can see it all. The baby, it knows." Dr. Cortez's eyes widened as she looked at her readings. The fetus is emitting unprecedented levels of neural activity. It seems to be interfacing directly with the station's systems. As Iris struggled through another contraction, the holographic display settled into a clear image of the Zargoth base. Detailed schematics and strategic information began to scroll alongside it. "This is incredible," Counselor Vexthor breathed, his political savvy momentarily overcome by awe. King Zixnor moved closer, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "Iris, what else can you see?" Iris's back arched as another wave of pain washed over her. Through gritted teeth, she managed to speak. "There's more, other bases, hidden outposts. The Zargoth, they're everywhere." The room erupted into a flurry of activity as the council members and Earth representatives began frantically taking notes and discussing the implications of this new information. Jeremy, however, remained focused solely on Iris. He wiped the sweat from her brow, murmuring words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Iris, just a little more." Dr. Cortez positioned herself at the foot of the makeshift birthing area. "Iris, I need you to push now. The baby is coming." With a cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of the station, Iris gave one final monumental push. A blinding flash of light filled the room, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. As the light faded, a new sound filled the air. The strong, healthy cry of a newborn child. Jeremy blinked away the spots in his vision to see Dr. Cortez holding a squirming, glowing infant. "It's a girl," Dr. Cortez announced, her voice filled with wonder. She quickly examined the child before placing her in Iris's waiting arms. Jeremy leaned in, his heart swelling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. The baby was beautiful, a perfect blend of human and Binar features. Her skin shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow. As Iris cradled their daughter, the infant's eyes fluttered open. Jeremy gasped. Where he had expected to see normal eyes, he instead saw irises that swirled with cosmic patterns, as if the very fabric of space and time was reflected within them. "Nova," Iris whispered, her exhaustion evident but her joy radiating from every part of her being. "Her name is Nova." As if in response to her name, the newborn Nova raised a tiny hand. The holographic display above the conference table sprang back to life, this time showing a vast map of the galaxy. Pinpoints of light began to appear, each one marking the location of a hidden Zargoth outpost. The room fell into stunned silence as the implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in. King Zixnor stepped forward, his eyes glistening with unshed tears as he gazed upon his granddaughter. "This child," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "she represents a new hope, not just for the Binar people, but for the entire galaxy." Jeremy looked from Nova to Iris, then to the assembled leaders of Earth and the Galactic Council. In that moment, he knew that everything had changed. The challenges ahead were still daunting, but for the first time since the Zargoth threat had emerged, he felt a glimmer of real hope. As Nova continued to manipulate the holographic display with impossible ease, Jeremy's mind raced with the possibilities. He began to formulate a plan, one that could potentially end the Zargoth threat once and for all. "I have an idea," he said, his voice cutting through the awed silence of the room. All eyes turned to him as he prepared to share his daring strategy, one that would harness Nova's unique abilities and change the course of galactic history.
If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.